I'm not going to lie to you. This right here feels like one of those moments where you can actually see the future of the Chiefs being decided in real time. Because on one side, we're talking about a team that might finally use that rare top 10 pick to fix a serious defensive issue, and on the other side, there's a real possibility of a bold move to bring in a game-changing tight end who could shape the offense for years to come. I'm Victor, and if you follow this team every single day like I do, you already know this isn't just another off-season storyline. This is about identity. Because after a season that didn't meet the standard, the Chiefs are now in a position where every decision carries a different kind of weight, especially with Patrick Mahomes coming back and expectations still sky high. On one hand, there's a strong push to go defense early in the draft, targeting a pass rusher to fix one of the biggest weaknesses we saw last season, and on the other hand, there's serious talk about Kansas City making a move for Sam Laporta, a young tight end who could be the future of this offense once Travis Kelce steps away. And that combination right there is what makes this so interesting, because it's not just about adding talent, it's about choosing a direction, about deciding whether this team is building for balance or making aggressive moves to stay ahead right now. So today we're breaking both of these scenarios down, what they really mean for the Chiefs and why this could be one of the most important turning points of the Mahomes era. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to have a strong opinion on what this team should actually do next. Alright, so when we really dive into this first scenario, this is where things start to feel a little different from what Chiefs fans are used to. Because for the first time in a long time, this team is not drafting at the bottom of the first round looking for complementary pieces. They are sitting at number 9 overall with a real opportunity to add a foundational player. And that alone already changes the entire conversation around what this pick should be. Because if you look at the projection that's been gaining traction, the idea here is not to go out and grab another flashy weapon for Patrick Mahomes, even though that's always the instinct, especially after an inconsistent offensive season, but instead to focus on the defensive side of the ball and address something that clearly held this team back, which is the lack of consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And that's something you could feel all season long, because even in games where the offense was doing enough to keep things competitive, there were too many moments where the defense simply couldn't close, couldn't disrupt, couldn't make that one big play that changes momentum. And when you don't have a reliable pass rush in today's NFL, you're basically asking your secondary to survive for too long on every single snap. So when a name like Ruben Bain Jr. comes into the conversation at 9, it's not just about talent, it's about fit and necessity, because this is the type of player who could step in immediately, line up opposite George Karlaftis, and give this defense the kind of versatility that Steve Spagnuolo loves, someone who can rush from different alignments, create mismatches, and most importantly, bring back that aggressive identity that has been missing at times. And when you look at his production, the pressures, the sacks, the way he consistently finds his way into the backfield, you start to understand why this kind of move makes so much sense, especially when the team struggled to generate that kind of impact last season, finishing with numbers that just don't match the standard this franchise has set over the years. Now, at the same time, I know exactly what a lot of fans are thinking, because it's the same thought that comes to my mind too, which is, what about the offense? Because we all saw the ups and downs, we all saw the inconsistency in the receiver room, and there's always that temptation to say, just give Mahomes another weapon and let him figure it out. But here's the reality, and this is where the front office has to be disciplined. This roster doesn't just have one need, it has multiple. And if you ignore a major weakness like the pass rush just to make a more exciting pick, you might end up creating an even bigger problem down the line, especially when you're trying to get back to being a complete team, not just an explosive one. And another thing that makes this decision even more interesting is the context of where the Chiefs are right now as a franchise. Because Mahomes is entering a different phase of his career, the roster is evolving, contracts are getting heavier, and suddenly having a young, high-impact defender on a rookie deal becomes incredibly valuable when you're trying to manage everything else around your quarterback. So this isn't just about the next season. This is about building something that can sustain success again, something that can compete deep into the playoffs without relying on one side of the ball to carry everything. And if that means going defense early, even if it's not the most exciting move on paper, it might actually be the smartest one. And the more you think about it, the more it starts to make sense. Because if you fix the defense, if you create more opportunities, if you give the offense better field position and less pressure, you're indirectly helping Mahomes just as much as you would by adding another receiver. But here's where things start to get really interesting, because even if the Chiefs decide to go in that direction and lock in a defensive piece at 9, that doesn't mean they're done making moves to help the offense, not even close. And there's another possibility out there right now that could completely change how this team looks on that side of the ball moving forward. And trust me, this next scenario is not just about adding depth. It's about potentially redefining the future of the Chiefs' offense in a way that nobody can ignore. All right, so now when we shift into this second scenario, this is where things start to feel a lot more aggressive and honestly a lot more strategic at the same time. Because what's being discussed here is not just adding another piece to the offense, it's about potentially securing the future of one of the most important positions in this entire system before it becomes a real problem. Because the idea of the Chiefs going after a player like Sam Laporta completely changes the conversation, since we're not talking about a developmental prospect or a late-round gamble. We're talking about a young tight end who has already proven he can produce at a high level in the NFL, someone who has put up strong numbers, shown real playmaking ability, and established himself as one of the most dangerous pass-catching tight ends in the league when healthy. And when you think about it from Kansas City's perspective, it actually makes a lot of sense, because even though Travis Kelce is still here and still contributing, everyone knows that we're getting closer to the end than the beginning, and replacing a player like Kelce is not something you can improvise overnight. It's something you have to plan for in advance if you want to avoid a massive drop-off in your offensive identity. That's why a move like this feels so different, because it's not just about the 2026 season. It's about what this offense looks like in 2027 and beyond. It's about making sure that Patrick Mahomes continues to have a reliable, dynamic tight end to work with. Someone who can stretch the field, create mismatches, and keep this system functioning at a high level, even after a legend like Kelce steps away. Now, on the Lions side, there's a reason this conversation is even happening, because despite Laporta's talent, there are concerns that can't be ignored, especially when it comes to injuries, including the fact that he's coming off back surgery and has had durability issues in the past, which naturally makes a team think twice about committing long-term money. And when you combine that with the fact that Detroit has other young players to extend and other areas to prioritize, suddenly Laporta becomes a very valuable but also movable asset, especially if they believe they can turn him into draft capital that helps them build a more balanced roster overall. So from their point of view, trading him is not about giving up on talent. It's about managing risk and reallocating resources, which is something smart teams do all the time, even if it looks surprising from the outside. Now, from the Chiefs' side, this is where things get really exciting, because adding Laporta into this offense would immediately give Mahomes another high-level weapon, someone who doesn't just complement the system, but fits perfectly into it, especially under Andy Reid, who has always known how to maximize tight ends in the passing game. And even if Laporta never becomes another Kelce, he doesn't have to, because his own skill set, his ability to create after the catch, his size, his presence in the middle of the field, all of that would give this offense a new layer that defenses would have to account for, especially when combined with the existing pieces already on the roster. But again, just like in the first scenario, this isn't a risk-free move, because you are dealing with a player who has injury concerns, who is entering the final year of his contract, and who will eventually require a financial decision if he performs well. So this is not just a football decision, it's also a long-term investment that has to be carefully evaluated. Still, when you look at the upside, when you imagine Mahomes having a young, athletic tight end who can grow into a central role in the offense, it's hard not to get excited, because this is the kind of move that doesn't just fill a gap, it creates continuity. It ensures that the transition from one era to another doesn't come with a massive drop in performance. Now, when you connect both of these scenarios together, this is where the bigger picture becomes very clear. Because what we're really seeing is a team trying to rebuild itself in a smart and balanced way, addressing defensive weaknesses while also preparing for the future of the offense. And that's why this moment feels so important. Because if the Chiefs manage to hit on both fronts, if they strengthen the defense and secure a future weapon like Laporta, then suddenly this team doesn't just recover, it evolves into something more complete and more sustainable. But if they get it wrong, if they misjudge the priorities or take the wrong risks, then there's a real chance that this team could struggle to find that balance again, especially in a conference as competitive as the AFC right now. So overall, I'd say this is a decisive and defining moment for the Chiefs, one that can either set them up for another run of success or leave them trying to catch up while other teams keep moving forward. And as a fan, you can't help but feel that mix of excitement and tension because you see the vision, you see what this team could become, but you also know that everything depends on getting these next moves absolutely right. And when you put everything together, this is what really defines where the Chiefs are right now. This is a team that is clearly trying to stay competitive in the present while also preparing for a future that might look very different, especially on offense. And that's why moves like potentially going after a player like Sam Laporta aren't just interesting. They're actually strategic in a much deeper way. Because at the same time you're dealing with roster gaps, inconsistencies from last season, and the pressure to bounce back immediately, you also have to start thinking about life after Travis Kelce. And that's not something you can fix overnight. So, if the front office really makes a move like this, it tells us they are thinking ahead instead of reacting late. Now, from a fan perspective, I'm not going to lie. This gives me a mix of excitement and caution, because on one hand, you see the vision, you see the potential of building something strong again around Mahomes, but on the other hand, it also shows that this team is still trying to figure itself out after a season that didn't meet the standard we're used to. So overall, this feels like a decisive moment for the Chiefs. Not necessarily a bad one, but definitely a defining one, where every move carries more weight than usual. And depending on how they handle these decisions, this team can either come back stronger and more complete, or stay stuck trying to chase what they once were. But now I really want to hear from you. Do you think going after a player like Laporta would actually be the right move for this team right now? Or do you feel like the Chiefs should be focusing somewhere else first? If you've been following this team like I have, you know this offseason is going to shape everything moving forward. So go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments, because I read every single one of them, and I love seeing different perspectives from you guys. And if you're enjoying this kind of content, talking Chiefs every single day like real fans do, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we're getting really close to hitting 2,100 subscribers. And honestly, it would mean a lot to have you here with us as we keep growing this community together.